This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are interviewing the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar Hayim.
Shalom, Rav.
Rabbi Bar Hayim, your halachic methodology differs from that of many others. How do you define your methodology, and on what is it based?
I have been asked this question on a number of occasions, and I've always begun by answering as follows. When I first began to study in yeshiva, one of the first things my Ram, that is to say the rabbi who taught the shiur in Gemara, the Talmud class, one of the first things he said to us was that when you study Gemara, you have to be an apikoros. By which he meant to say, as he went on to explain, that you must not believe what anybody says. You have to ask questions and understand what is being said, why it is being said. So that if Abaye says something in the Gemara, you have to understand why he said that and what he meant. And if you don't, you have to keep asking questions. Because you have to understand. The most important thing, he explained, is that you fully understand what is being said. And this is exactly what I tried to do. However, I discovered some years later, as happens to many young men who study in yeshiva, and then after a period of time they get married, and they begin to learn in what's called a kollel, what's called rabbinical studies, which are supposedly designed to train them how to be in a position to be posek halacha, to give halachic decisions on different matters. I discovered that this in fact is now apparently no longer the aim of our study. All of a sudden it became apparent that now we were expected to simply gain a certain familiarity with certain sources and become aware of the different opinions, and then, most important of all, to know that this is how we paskin, so to speak, in inverted commas. This is how we paskin. In other words, this is the accepted view, and this is what is expected of you. This is what you must say when asked this question. You don't necessarily have to understand the issue fully even, and you don't necessarily have to feel that this position, this answer is the correct one, but this is what you must say, because that is how we paskin. And almost no emphasis was really placed on understanding the sources fully and dealing with the different opinions in an intellectually honest manner. This really went by the by. All that was left was an automated, almost robotic form of study, of simply remembering certain opinions and knowing which one we follow. And I always felt that there was something very wrong about this approach. And the more I looked into it, the more I discovered that many other great Torah sages throughout the ages had expressed such a view. If, for example, we look at the Maharshal, Rabbi Shlomo Luria, the same generation as the Shulchan Aruch, so we're talking about the 16th century, he writes in his introduction to Yam Shel Shlomo that the only correct halachic methodology for deciding halacha is to study the sources, the Talmudic sugya, and the different interpretations of the Rishonim, the medieval scholars, and decide based on weighing up all the possibilities and all the commentaries, deciding which is the more reasonable and the more correct, the opinion that fits all the sources better than any other opinion and explanation, and following that view, and that is the halacha. The Chazon Ish, in fact, in much more recent times, expresses a similar view. He says that the halacha is that which it seems to a Tamid Chachamim, a Torah scholar who has studied the sources fully and has weighed up all the options and the interpretations in his mind properly, what seems to him to be the halacha, that is the halacha, so says the Chazon Ish. And this was also the view of the Gra, the Gaon Vilna, and his student Rabbi Hayim Volozhin, and this was also the view of the Rogatchover. This was also the view of Rabbi David Friedman Mikarlin, and many other Gdolei Olam that one could mention. Great Torah scholars in different generations who all had this approach. Even more important, perhaps, one should note that this was the approach, this was the attitude of all the Rishonim and all the Gaonim. In earlier times, in the time of the Gaonim, we're talking about the 8th, 9th, 10th centuries, and in medieval times beyond that date, in Europe and other countries in the Middle East, all the Rishonim had this view, this understanding of Talmudic and Halachic study. That one studies the sources in depth, does one's utmost to understand, based on a thorough acquaintance with all the sources and all the interpretations of the great authorities that came before us, and weighing all these things up, and if necessary and where appropriate, perhaps suggesting a new interpretation or a new understanding. And based on all of that process, which is all based on intellectual honesty and trying to truly understand and arrive at the truth, based on all of that, one can finally express an halachic opinion. As opposed to what we see nowadays, by and large. Of course there are exceptions, but by and large what we see nowadays is that people are taught, and when I say people I mean yeshiva students who go on to become rabbis. People are taught that you have no opinion, you do not know, and you cannot know what the truth of the matter is, and all you are expected to do, and all you are in fact allowed to do, is to parrot the views of others, to say that this is what the Shach said, or this is what Rabbi so-and-so holds, and therefore that is what you should do, without any reference to the question of whether you actually understand the issue at hand fully, and whether you can believe this reality to be this psak halacha, this view to be true and correct and fitting the reality before us. I will end with a story, a true story about Rabbi Yossi Misalant, who was a great Torah sage in his own right, even though he became known mainly for his moralistic teachings, his musar, but he was a great Talmid Chachamim and a great expert in halacha as well. But he eschewed any rabbinical position in any great community in Eastern Europe, and he was once asked why. And he said, because I find myself in a quandary. He said, I know that on many issues, having looked into the question, into the sugya, I discover that the views of some of the posakim, the better known posakim, are not correct in my view. And then I would find myself in a problem, because if I were asked that particular question, I would have to choose between simply repeating what certain earlier authorities decided, even though I'm convinced that it's not true, or expressing my own view and running the risk of being told, well, how could you disagree with so-and-so? Or don't you even know that this is not how we hold, this is not how we paskin? And I didn't want to find myself in that position, and therefore I chose not to take upon myself any such rabbinical position. The fact that a great chacham, a great rabbi, had to deal with such a situation, with such a quandary, that itself is a tragic situation and a very sad and worrying commentary on the reality of Torah studies in recent generations. But there is, Baruch Hashem, there is a solution, there is a way out, and that is to return to the form of Torah study that has always been the gold standard for all true Chachamim, to study the sources honestly and openly, not to accept any particular view or position or any particular authority as unassailable, always to strive for the truth, to be objective, honest, of course based on much study and humility and experience. And yet the truth is dearer to our heart than anything else. That is why we refer to the Torah as Torah Emeth, Torah of truth. That is the true way, that has always been the true way, the true methodology for studying and understanding the Torah, and this is the way that Torah students who wish to achieve true greatness should follow.
Thank you, Harav Bar Hayim. A word to our viewers. If you would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with Rabbi Hayim in honor or memory of a loved one, or if you would like to order a Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.